All right, hello everyone. Welcome to this week's lesson. This week we're going to be talking about ethics and professionalism and criminal justice. As always, feel free to take notes. A lot of this may seem redundant, but it is something that I think take for granted in a lot of situations in my professional career. You would not imagine um, people coming out of college getting their first job and not truly understanding the professional atmosphere. So this week is really, really important. Um, and the content this week is really, really important that you kind of understand how ethics and professionalism intertwine in the criminal justice realm, because you will see that there are a lot of ethical decisions that we have to make. So, as always, feel free to take notes as we go along. Um, I will timestamp this so that you can go back and watch um, at your leisure any parts that you may have missed or needed further clarification on. So here are your learning outcomes. I don't always do this. I need to get better at putting these in here. So I am trying to put these in here. But at the end of this lesson, hopefully you'll be able to define ethics, recognize why it's crucial, identify what discretion means and how it operates, highlight the role of racial profiling um, within criminal justice, and identify why corruption is an ongoing concern. And then finally, you'll be able to describe how professionalism operates in the criminal justice system. So, why is ethics and professionalism so important in our field? Well, the simple answer is we have regular contact with the general public. Because everything that we do, anyone who works in the public, whether it be criminal justice professionals, social services professionals, medical professionals, media professionals, everything we do is under a microscope. And so we have to maintain that professional image when we're performing our job and doing it with the utmost ethical regard. It's important for us to realize that we have to be compassionate and service oriented. Some personality characteristics that assist law enforcement officers in completing their jobs is emotional stability, agreeable nature, conscientious, extrovert, and open to experience. In essence, realize that everything that we do is under a microscope working with the public, whether it be posting on social media privately, what you do in your off time, what you do while you're at work, um, any interaction that you have um, can potentially change your career trajectory um, if you were to act unethically or unprofessionally. So I don't know if you've had the ethics class yet, but if you haven't, let's all get on the same page as to what we're talking about when we say the word ethics. The word ethics is derived from the Greek word ethos and from the Latin word mores. So essentially, ethics are the basic moral principles that govern individuals' behavior and how individuals go about conducting their daily lives. It's essentially how we choose to interact with each other. So, as I said, working in criminal justice is working in the public. So, we have to be very aware of our decision making and how we act, how we present ourselves. And so, public perception is fickle. One thing that you will realize in this job, no matter what road or avenue of criminal justice that you go down, is you are going to be under a microscope, and a lot of times you're going to be the bad guy in situations and not going to be able to tell the whole story or your side of the story to the general public. So we know that the media is very influential in kind of shaping public opinion. And in doing that, a lot of people only get that one side of the story. I can tell you, working in juvenile probation and in child welfare, I dealt with HIPAA laws. And so we'll talk a little bit more about this, but a lot of my work was done in private, and the general public couldn't know details of what was going on. So if you had a parent that got on Facebook and said, they took my babies, or when I was a probation officer, you got a kid on there that says, haha, that I just got beat up and they're not doing anything about it. No, they're supposed to be on probation, blah, blah, blah. I'm not able to go on there and tell the side of the story um, of what really is going on. And so if we don't act in an ethical way, or um, in a way that treats people with dignity, the public is going to lose faith in us. They won't trust that what we're doing is the best for the situation. In fact, in law enforcement, if the public loses faith in their own law enforcement, they're not going to rely on them or call them when something goes down. And so this snowballs into massive public safety concerns, um, should public perception shift. So we just had some public perception issues. Criminal justice, you're very much, especially law enforcement, you're very susceptible to negative public perception due to um, varying degrees. So, like recently, back in what was it, 2020, with George Floyd, and Breonna Taylor, and some massive, like, bad decisions on the part of professionals that cost people their lives. Um, People started questioning the role of law enforcement. And so we see these ethical concerns really around like excessive force, use of abuse of power, um, failing to fulfill duties that people think you should be fulfilling. And once they lose that confidence in you, you've just blown it for the entire system. So if you've ever had me for like intro class or any class that we talk about discretion, you're going to have heard me say something along the lines of discretion is probably one of the most dangerous tools that we have in criminal justice or in public service in general. And essentially, discretion is the power of a public official, private party, to act according to the dictates of their own judgment and conscience within the general legal principles. So essentially, it is the ability to act based on the situation, um, of course, within societal boundaries. Um, but we see time and time again, and this is underscored through research, that the law is not equally enforced, and discretion varies across officers and across departments. Um, and you're going to read an article that I'll highlight on the next slide, by Huff, and it basically looked at um, the discretion during arrest, officer discretion during arrest. And what we saw was, you know, individual characteristics play a huge role in whether people are arrested or not. Whether it be neighborhood, racial, ethnic population distributions, or education status. We see that. Discretion can be dangerous in stop and frisk situations that New York got into issues with. So, overall, the use of discretion can be an important tool that we use, but we have to apply it consistently throughout our work. And that goes for any portion of the system that you work in. Consistency is the key to making decisions and using discretion. Here is the slide on the article that I have linked in Folio. But essentially, Huff's findings underscored that when officers are allowed to have discretion, meaning that the law doesn't dictate that they have a mandate to arrest, but when they are um, allowed to have discretion, you saw more arrests. Um, Especially when it was self-initiated. So the officer stops someone and isn't called there. And sorry, you're going to hear my dog in the background. And really, you kind of get into that the issue of um, unproportional application of the law based on race, based on socioeconomic status, and based on education status. And so this brings up kind of the issue of racial profiling, the issue of application, the overall issue of the dangerousness of discretion. And so, as professionals, we use discretion in our daily work. Um, I use discretion when I'm uh, applying laws or I am interpreting policies and procedures, things like that. So we have to not go into this profession seeking power. If you want to be a criminal justice professional because you want the badge or you want the power that comes with it, then you need to drop this course and you need to drop out. Because if you are getting into this profession because of getting power, you don't need to be here. It is unethical and against many codes of conduct, whether it be law enforcement code of conduct, anything like that, that you get on power trips and that an individual would get on power trips or an individual would um, utilize their power for their own good. That is when we get into unethical situations. And so it's very important to realize that it's very easy to go down this hole. I read an article one time around law enforcement stops uh, that it was just easier for law enforcement to stay in lower socioeconomic neighborhoods because they would get more stops that way. And so essentially, discretion has been misapplied in various facets. But we have to be very cognizant of the power that we have and not abuse that power. All right. So, as I stated earlier, this slide's all about racial profiling. So, discretion or the mismanagement of the discretion that you have has often led to the practices of racial profiling. And we see that, and it's backed up with years of research in law enforcement, specifically with road officers and law enforcement officers. But it can permeate throughout our entire system. Most studies in child welfare have found that there are more minority children in foster care than there are white children because we apply the discretion that we have um, wrong, basically. Um, and so we get into this gray area, which is what can get you in trouble. Ultimately, your unethical decisions are when situations aren't really cut and dry. When you get any type of leeway to critically think or interpret situations for yourself, that's where ethical dilemmas come in. I wanted to share this survey from 2020 from the Kaiser Family Foundation. And it basically talks about racial discrimination or violence that minorities and minority perception in law for law enforcement. So, just very eye opening, kind of backs up that uh, statement around racial profiling and perception and public perception. Um, when things happen and public perception deteriorates, you see real world implications. So, like Black, non Hispanics, and Hispanics were more likely to be afraid that their life was in danger if they um, had police stops or things like that. So, 21% of Black non-Hispanics, and then 8% of Hispanic population had been victims of police violence. So it's just very, very eye-opening that public perception has specifically um, shaped how the profession is seen because of a few unethical behavior actors. So corruption. Corruption is the last kind of part of our ethical conversation. So when we're talking about ethics and unethical behavior, you're really kind of talking about um, improper use of discretion, racial profiling, and corruption. So corruption is defined as dishonest or fraudulent behavior or conduct by those that are in positions of power. And it's historically permeated throughout the law enforcement and criminal justice communities. Um, the National Institute of Justice did a study in 2020 that's on here, but they examined 57,000 corruption cases and found that the most um, dominant types of conduct were fraud and bribery. And you can see how um, people can make those split second decisions that can forever change the trajectory of their career, but of the profession as a whole. So let's say you're a law enforcement officer and you make a stop and the person offers you $100 cash not to give them a ticket. That's bribery. And if you take that $100, you've just become a part of the problem and you've just committed unethical behavior because there are um, codes of ethics that govern behavior, and any violation of those codes of ethics would be considered unethical behavior. All right, so let's talk about professionalism. So essentially, professionalism is um, thought of as the standards of expectations that someone has when in the workplace. You can see the official Merriam Webster definition there. I'm not going to read it to you, but it essentially is those standards that tell us how we're to look, how we're to act, and how we're to interact with people. Believe it or not, um, every profession has some type of standards that dictate professionalism. Uh, when I worked for juvenile justice, DJJ, and DFACS, we had Georgia State Employee Code of Ethics. And that code of ethics dictated how we kept our hair, how we were supposed to be groomed, how our nails were supposed to look, how we were supposed to dress. Things like that are all dictated so that we keep our appearance and our actions as professional as possible. So, why is this important? Well, this is important because it takes between 2 to 3 seconds for someone to judge your likability. Essentially, did you know that? We snap judge everything, and it only takes 2 to 3 seconds to know whether that person is professional, know whether that person is likable, know whether that person is approachable. So there are four main issues of professionalism in our criminal justice realm. We're going to take each one of these um, line by line so that you clearly kind of can articulate how these interplay with the criminal justice realm. So we're going to start with media. Criminal justice professionals are subjected to public scrutiny. Media presence can always be a double edged sword. And in a lot of situations, you as an entry level employee are not allowed to talk to the media. There are rules that govern who can talk to the media. So, while proactive use of the media can be a beneficial outlet for increasing public perception, media are rooted in maintaining and increasing viewership and promoting information in ways benefiting their agenda. There's always a hidden agenda with the media. And so, a lot of law enforcement agencies, state agencies, criminal justice agencies have media spokesperson who are those media points of contact. It's critical to remember that generally the public has the right to record most interactions in our setting and in our profession. There's a lot of misinterpretation or misunderstanding, but the public has a right to video their interactions. I've been on YouTube many times, um, uh, knowingly and unknowingly. And it's important to understand we live in an age of technology. You guys have grown up with social media like I never knew when I was growing up. There are policies and procedures that we put in place in the practitioner world that govern your use of your private social media. Now, you may be saying, Mr. Dean, what are you talking about? Well, as a DFACS employee, I could not post anything about work. I could not post, my boss is such a jerk. I could not post, um, I've had such a crappy day. I've taken this many kids, or when I was a probation officer, I couldn't post, I just had a kid try to kill somebody with a machete. You can't post anything about work on your personal social media. You also cannot get into one of those, like what's going on in Statesboro websites on social media, or like where people badmouth different agencies and things like that. You can't get on there and defend your agency. So, like when we had this page on Facebook called What's Going On in Chatsworth, which is where I'm from. And every so often, people would go on there and complain about the DFACS office. Well, I couldn't go on there and defend that DFACS office because I had policies and procedures that prohibited me from talking about anything related to work. Now, this also extended to making my opinions known about certain aspects. So I would never post political opinions while I was working for the state. Why? Because people could see that I was a state employee. And if I posted something that went against what the governor was pushing, people could use that against me. Um, and as crazy as that seems, it's reality. Social media is a great thing, but social media is the fastest thing that will get you fired in the real world. I have had to fire so many people for misusing their social media. And one other thing that I kind of want to talk about, let me look. I don't think I will get to it. Oh, yes, I will. I'll get to it here in just a minute. All right, so that's what I want to say about media. Let's move on. Now let's talk about your appearance. We've talked a little bit about appearance, but it is important for you to realize that when you go to a job interview, you need to dress business professional. You always dress conservatively until you're told otherwise. So, um, in law enforcement, in community corrections, like when I was a probation officer, I was given a uniform that you had to wear. Law enforcement was always given, they're always given uniforms. Correctional officers are always given uniforms. So just because you're given a uniform, you still have to take care of that uniform. I couldn't come to work with my khakis wrinkled. I had to make sure they were ironed and steamed. Um, a lot of law enforcement officers have to make sure their shoes are shined. Georgia State Patrol officers um, are very militaristic. That's a hard word to say. And so you will have to have it creased a certain way. Your shoes have to shine, things like that. You always have to be cognizant of how you are actually presenting yourself. And a piece of advice that I was given in the professional world that no one ever told me was you dress for the job you want, not for the job you have. And that doesn't mean dress like Batman or dress like Wonder Woman or dress like Cardi B. What that means is dress for the next level in your profession if you're allowed to. So when I was a social worker and worked for DFACS, they didn't really have that much of a dress code. Like, yes, you had to wear a suit or um, dresses for ladies to court and profess and dress professionally for court, but you typically did like business casual for all the others. So I always dressed in like nice khakis, very preppy, business professional, um, and then did like jeans on Friday or something. So always gauge how you're supposed to dress. And if you don't know, ask on your interviews, ask. But on your interviews, please come to your interviews dressed in like a suit. So that's like a not like a button-up shirt, guys, ties with like suit jacket, suit pants. Ladies, your wardrobe's a little bit more you have a little bit more options, so you can dress in nice dresses, pantsuits, things like that. But you always want to dress in suits for those type of occasions. You always should be neatly groomed. So, like I said, please bathe. I know that sounds crazy, but you're going to want to make sure that you are um, as clean as possible. And so, your hair length can be monitored, nail length, all of that. Um, don't go to work like you've been out all night. You want to make sure you're clean, you're bathed, and ready to be in the public eye. Communication is another issue. Hang on. So, communication etiquette and interpersonal skills are key considerations in maintaining professional demeanor. So, you can read our syllabi, your professors, and a lot of us will have how we want you to communicate with us. We're not doing that to be sticklers. We're doing that to get you ready for the professional world. I should not receive an email from you that is like you texted it from your phone. You should be spelling correctly. You should be using proper grammar. You should address individuals by their title. Don't use jargon, things like that. And always remember in our profession, written records are public. Anyone can do a public records request and get any of the documents, your emails. If you have your business email on your personal phone can become evidence and be seized if anything ever happened and they needed to get to your um, business emails, things like that. All of your communication is open to the public to see. So you're always wanting to be conscious of that as you kind of move forward in the world. All right, and finally, let's talk about your demeanor. Essentially, live by the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. When interacting with other professionals, remain polite, collegial, and positive while avoiding talking over others. Don't gossip, things like that. Always remember you are under a microscope and someone is watching in this work, in this profession. Body cam videos. It takes one instance for you to wind up on the news in a video, something like that. So I want to leave you with this quote that was in your book that I loved, and it was by Oprah Winfrey. And essentially, it says, "Real integrity is doing the right thing, knowing that no one's ever going to know whether you did it or not." All right, that is the lesson this week. I have several things linked in folio for you to look at, so make sure you go through that. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, I hope you all have a great week.